Ladies and gentlemen, members and friends, welcome. My name's Matt Bailey. I'm the National Ambassador for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. Really appreciate you joining me live for what is going to be a chat with David Vitale. He's the founder of Starward Distillery in Melbourne, and he's going to be joining us very shortly. He's literally just texted me saying he's having some Wi-Fi issues. So we'll give him a couple of minutes. This is a massive relief that he's just having Wi-Fi issues and it's not sort of like, anything else. When a guest doesn't show up at 7, it's kind of like, hope they haven't been hit by a bus. But in this case, he hasn't. And I really appreciate you tuning in and having a chat with us to ask the founder, ask the guy who started it all with Starward, where it all began. I just want to shout out to Whiskey Is My Jam and shout out to Facebook user. When it says Facebook user, that is someone who hasn't allowed Restream permissions. We're not on StreamYard anymore. We're on Restream. We've been on Restream for about 2 years now. Pardon me. But good to see you all. I hope you're all having a marvelous evening. Tonight's going to be all about Starward Distillery, as we've I'm the one who should be saying Distillery 148. Yes, better pour yourself a tawny. Says someone here, and Karina, wave from Karina. Hello, Karina. Look, we're going to be joining with the founder himself of Starward when he gets here. Like I said, a couple of Wi-Fi issues. So for those watching along live, I'm just going to see what he says. Just 1 second here. 1 second. Okay, we're still just having a couple of Wi-Fi issues going on here. So bear with us. What we'll do is we'll just ad lib for a bit. I can tell you what's going on at the society, what's happening around. You can ask questions of me if you like. I've already poured a dram of something from Distillery 148 in my glass here right now. But I'm going to see how we go with Dave. This is unexpected, of course. These things happen. This is live broadcast. We'll trim it for the YouTube, of course, once he's back on deck. We'll give him another sort of 5 or 10 minutes or something. See how he goes. Otherwise, we'll have to get him on another time. No, it's a good question. It's not 148.3. No, it's literally 148.1. Sorry, this one is. Yeah, I poured a little bit of 148.1. I had a smidge left in a sample bottle. I still have my full bottle of it, which I picked up for myself as a sort of like a memento of working on this bottling, working on this cask. I don't keep a massive library of bottlings for myself. We do keep a bit of an archive at the society, but personally, I mean, this was such a monumental sort of moment. Monumental moment? Anyway, it was such a milestone for the branch to be able to bottle 148.1 and present that to the world. So I'm going to keep that bottle aside from a special occasion. And I've also still got a bottle of 148.2, the Kirsch Me Quick, which was also very popular with members, which is great to see. But we've got we've got things in the works always going on around the place. And it's always great to see. Man, hair flick day, huh? Can't get it right. That's what happens when you get another haircut. So yeah, we're going to wait just live for a little bit. I'll take your questions and comments as we go. But yeah, in the meantime, see how Dave goes. Like I said, seems to be having some network issues. But that's the way it goes. Yes. Look, I'll give him a bit of time. We had some great slides and great questions queued up in this other screen here. for when he arrives, but we'll see how he it goes. Taking some questions from people coming in. Michael, Michael, Michelle. I'm going to say that wrong. Really sorry. Bednarik. Michelle Bednarik. That is, the core range. Like honestly, the Solera for me is fantastic. Fortis is really good. Fortis is really sort of robust. It's definitely a stylistic, very wine forward kind of casks. When I say wine forward, as in like it's full wine cask maturation. Mike. Okay, I'll go with Mike. Thank you, Mike. But yeah, I think you hit me up on Twitter today. This is like, the whole range is worth trying. In fact, we were going to talk about this when Dave gets here about the whole sort of, they've just won a whole slew of awards, and it's really exciting for them. And man, that fluoro green is doing my head in. How does that work? That looks a bit better. They've just done like a whole sort of like, that's just won a whole slew of awards. So see how they go see how I go there. Question coming in, any bottles dropping tomorrow? Yes, it is, of course, another weekly release from the Society. Then the weekly release tomorrow, I think it's just the one bottling, but it's a tasty one. It's a distillery, it's an early code, so it's Distillery 2, but it's a really tasty teenage cask from Distillery 2, and I think it rounds out the quadrilogy series as well, tomorrow's release. So that's a question from Rob and from Whiskey is My Jam. Jesse Morgan says, I stand by the Fortis as from the core range as my go-to Aussie whiskey. Yeah, I'll agree with that. It's robust, it's affordable, it's approachable, it's everything they want, I guess, their brand to be. We'd have a better representation of what their brand's meant to be if we had Dave here. But you know what? We'll see how he goes. Like I said, I'll always spare some time for him because this is connectivity issues are going to be a pain, and I guess he's restarting his modem or something. He just tried calling before. He's just texted saying 5 minutes apparently. I don't know where he is. He could probably just. I know he's somewhere in Australia at the moment, but we'll see how we go. He's been here doing a few sort of events and whatnot. Bit of a sort of a David Vitale super tour. So if you're watching this live stream, this is the only time you'll see this footage, because after tonight's live stream, we're going to chop and change this a bit, so you've got a bit of time to catch up with Dave, and we'll put the sort of the cropped version of this video, I guess, up online. Here's a question that I've been asked a few times by different members: how far away is 148.3? Look, it's a while away still, because it's ready when it's ready. And even like, the distillate from 148 doesn't need a whole lot of time in cask. So it definitely, it doesn't need, it's not one of those whiskeys where I say, it's going to be ready in 15 years. No. It's like, it's going to be ready soon, but I'd say don't hold your breath for this year. Let's put it that way. We want it to be right, and we want it to be ready. So we're going to go with, we'll probably sort of, if not late this year, we could look at something like, we're looking maybe at early next, but that's okay. We had the 148.2 this year, and that was really popular back in February. We're now in April, so it's only been 2 months since the last one. So yeah. I remember that first release red wine cask. Someone was saying, it was a 41%. It had sort of a black label. It said sort of wine cask edition 1 or something. I remember that. Yeah, you're all getting the director's cut right now whilst we wait for Dave. Some other announcements coming through at the moment. Here we go. Has SWS released whiskey liqueurs in the past? Will they again? The answer to that in order is yes, but probably not. So yes, there was Island Liqueur. There was Island Liqueur 4. There was Whiskey Liqueur 24, which indicated the distillery of which the liqueur was based from. So 4 and 24, which were very, very tasty. I've had an opportunity to taste both. In fact, we opened the Island Liqueur 4 at a tasting in Sydney about 3 or 4 years ago now, which was pretty special. But probably, look, it's not really our focus at the moment. No, I mean, our focus is in flavor, so never say never. There might be opportunity for maybe something like that down the track, but I wouldn't say immediately, no. But yeah, see how we go. If someone told me that, if you asked me back in like 2015, would the society ever be bottling any sort of cognac? And I'd be like, no, surely not. But we did. And we haven't seen too many cognacs in the last couple of years. In fact, when I say too many, I mean none. But it's always sort of, it comes in waves, a lot like distillery codes. We went like 3 or something years without seeing a single 53 is a good example. Like, you go, these come in waves as per when they're ready, as per when they're bottled, as per when we're able to get them out to members. So it really is sort of a process involved with its many moving parts between production and the production team at the UK, of which I'll be having a good chat with next week, which will be great. Evening all. Yes, evening to you. But yeah, they've done a lot of interesting stuff. If you're tuned in right now and you're one of the 15 or 20 people watching right now, which is great, thank you so much. Actually, it's a few more than that, because that number doesn't count all the YouTubes. We're going live with David Vitale, the founder of Starward. He is having some internet issues, so we're going to just give him a few more minutes. He reckons he said he's 5 minutes away 3 minutes ago, so I reckon another couple of minutes he'll be here. Yeah, we'll get in touch with him, see what he's saying, see what he's up to, and yeah, go from there. Give us a rant while we wait. Bonus content. Yeah, I mean, I haven't done a proper Bailey rant in a while. Those were the days, though. Those were the days, the daily Instagram live, the early days of producing content, which was great. I mean, they had their time and place. They sort of, shaped what we our sort of our process, and shaped our comms, and really found an avenue for us to communicate with members, which I certainly enjoyed. And I enjoyed the I enjoyed the sort of the process and the thing. Oh, he's Dave. Okay. Just pop him that link, make sure he's got it. Yeah, we need a rant. Yeah. yeah. Oh, look, there's some things I'd love to rant about, but yeah, sometimes it might not be wholly appropriate. But I mean, a lot of you know my rants already. But yeah. Look, yeah. Actually, you know what? Actually, I'm not gonna throw him in it too deep. But Andrew's got an interesting take coming up in the May outturn. I'd call that a rant, but a very justifiable one. It's he's definitely jumped into a topic that is a bit of a sore point at the moment in whiskey. So we're definitely gonna. He's taking the mantle of taking the rants for the moment. Whiskey is my jam, says we've seen some distillery codes this year not seen in years through Oz. 5 and 85 been great. Yeah, you know what? That's exciting for me. That's really exciting for me. Like seeing these codes pop up. I always get excited by. There's two main areas of codes in the society that I get really excited by. Ones that we haven't seen in a while, like 85 and 5 are huge examples. By the way, the 5s that we're getting through, they've got a couple more coming as well, are all just like delicious, like vanilla ice cream in a glass. And I know you think of Distillery 5 sometimes and you're not really sort of overly enamored maybe with the core range. I think that's really fair to say, by the way. It's not exactly a distillery that is, where people rave about the core range, but it certainly is one that, where there's an opportunity to improve on that and change that as well. So there you go. Yeah, you did a rant. Evening from a few people here. Lots of evenings coming through. Evening to all. Good to see you all. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We are live right now. We are going live. We've been live for 15 minutes. Here he is. Okay, so Dave Vitale's made it back. He's here. His internet's working. I'm going to bring him in. Before I do, I'm going to let him stew just for a second. I said before that this is going out on our YouTube channel. There it is. Have you not pressed this button yet, the subscribe button and the notifications on? There's my YouTube plug. You've got to join our channel. There's lots of things that go out on our socials, but there's so much more content that goes on our YouTube channel. And it's so great to see so many people enjoying it, from virtual pubs to whiskey reviews to partner bars. Our amazing partner bar staff, even at the Society, international guests. We have a lot of things going on around there. And I encourage you to press that button. Now it's time for DV himself, the founder of Starward, having a chat with Society members tonight about what we're doing. So let's bring him in.
G'day, mate. How are you?
Good to see you made it.
I made it. I'm so sorry. Like it's Murphy's Law, right? Like I just thought I've been using the laptop all day and I was just got a quick bite to eat. I thought I'd come back to the room, get on it and be done. And then all of a sudden nothing worked.
No, that's okay. That's okay. That's all good. These things happen. I was gonna say I was sweating bullets at about 6:59. I was like, he's got to be here shortly. This is a thing. So I've been ad-libbing for about 16 minutes.
Yeah. Well, if there's anyone in the world that can ad lib, it's Matt Bailey.
This guy. All right. Well, great to have you on. I just want to have a quick chat with you tonight about some history. I'm going to show you some photos and then ask you some questions about the journey. You'll know all this already. This is all your journey, but I wanted to just show you a few as we went along. And then you can say that's absurd or that's fantastic, and then answer member questions as we go along. So throw your questions in the comments, everyone, of course, as always.
And please do, because like I think Matt sort of said, is there anything off limits? And I'm like no. I mean, ask me anything. This is a great opportunity.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'll take your glamour photo down just for a second, and I'll say this is off the back of us collaborating with Starward really closely, which we've really enjoyed. In the last 6 months, we've bottled 148.1 and 148.2, and being able to go through the warehouse, especially with your amazing downstream team, and picking out some casks has been an absolute delight, and something that personally for me I feel quite like connected to, because you and I go way back, and now we do, and it's sort of like those early days of me visiting the distillery around 2011 and seeing some of those early days and me thinking then like I just enjoy this, and I never thought that this would happen today. And it's like, well, sorry, that side of the screen, but yeah, of that actually coming to fruition. So thank you again for sort of, I guess you were very much the facilitator of this in some ways.
Absolutely. And I think look, I don't think it's any secret that Starward was always sort of set out as a modern interpretation of whiskey. I think for those of you that don't know, I learned how to make whiskey with Bill Lark at the Lark Distillery, and I learned so much about how to make great whiskey, but I also learned a lot about what needed to change if we were going to be in everybody's sharing cabinet. So
you've mentioned that phrase before, the sharing cabinet. So what you'd need to get to be in that space.
Yeah, and because the idea is, Matt, I mean, we've all got a special occasion cabinet, something that sort of like sits on the side for special occasions, perhaps like winning 12 double gold medals.
I'm getting to that. In fact, it was actually the next slide. There it is. That was literally announced yesterday. So congratulations.
Thank you, mate. So, I think, everyone's got special occasion cabinet whiskies that they're saving for a moment, but we all have or should have like our sharing cabinet, which is something that's like, it might be whiskies in rotation. It could be your like mainstays because they've just, they're meaning for you in some ways. And for me, like I wanted Starwood to be in that sharing cabinet sort of set, because well, that's just who we are. I just felt like I've got plenty of whiskies in my sharing cabinet and I'll never get through all of them. That's a fact. And I wanted Starward to be something that, would democratize Australian whiskey and, be available to everybody to try, not just here, but around the world. And so, working with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society almost seems a little bit like opposite to that idea, but equally so important, because
it's the other end of the spectrum. It covered, like, it's almost broadened your product range as a result.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that the beautiful thing about making whiskey in Australia, if you think of it this way, is that we've got so much that we can do with our whiskey. Like right from the grain through to, bottling. Every bit of that process has a huge amount of innovation that is like so constrained when you think about it in the context of Scotch or particularly bourbon, And so the opportunity to share amazing Australian whiskey like ours, and I know you're doing others as well, right, around the world, and showcasing that diversity that comes from Australia is awesome. And, and of course we want to be a part of that.
Yeah, awesome. I'm going to throw questions in as we go. And of course, a huge congratulations on what you can see on the screen here. Ecstatic to announce that 12 of your entries attained double gold, which is just massive for that format. And just like, I think it was a good mix as well of sort of single casks for specific markets and, core range, which was just fantastic to see.
Winning one double gold medal is pretty special. And
yeah.
The difference between a gold and a double gold is that every single judge ranked your whiskey. It was a unanimous gold, effectively. So in and of itself, to get unanimously a gold medal with one of your products is amazing. But to do it 12 times in one session is like catching lightning in a bottle. And, this is a reflection of all the things that, boy, for the last 15 years, I've been striving towards in terms of consistency, like, that accessibility and deliciousness that kind of means that people are going to grab it from the sharing cabinet and not, shake their hand as they're pouring it into a friend that maybe might like it or not like it because it's, you're worried about how much per ounce you're pouring into the glass,
Yeah.
And just being distinctively Australian. And so I think that these awards are kind of highlighted the fact that we stood out, that there was something there that for, those judges really stood out amongst that pack very consistently.
I think I first got to grasp of your ambition for Starward was when you said that you weren't competing up against like your Overeems and your Larks and your Sullivan's Coves. You were competing against, say, Russell's Reserve or Monkey Shoulder, and that was sort of like that focus and that ambition to create something that's on the sharing shelf and in the sharing cabinet, as you say. Or it's and I think that was the first point when you said that 10 years ago or something. I remember going, yeah, that's rather cool. That's going to be a distillery of scope and scale.
Because here's the thing, like you go to, having lived in the United States for 3 years now, you go to a liquor store, the equivalent of a Dan Murphy's, like a chain, Total Wine and More, or an ABC, or if you're in Illinois, like Binny's, and there's literally 30 to 40 meters of bourbon, 5 meters of Scotch whiskey, and like 2 meters of whiskey from the rest of the world. So the job to be done in that context is not saying, hey, you know what, like we need to be on this shelf and we're better than Kavalan or better than Japanese whiskey, or no, it's about saying, bourbon can often be boring and beige and very nostalgic in its approach to whiskey making. And that like, we're all curious. I know you are, right? I know I am. And it doesn't, and you could be curious and have had 5 whiskeys in your life, or curious and had 5,000 whiskeys in your life, but we're all curious. And so what I want to do is just basically turn up interesting for that curious whiskey drinker and be compelling from that perspective. And so, because we're talking about a Russell's Reserve or a Monkey Shoulder or any of the Glens or Belveni or something from Isla, and even, Johnny Walker Black, which I think is highly, highly, highly underrated, as a whiskey.
Oh, yes. No, it's hugely underrated. Yeah.
Like if we're going to turn up in that set, we've got to bring it. Like we've got to bring something that's compelling for the drinker to go, yeah, I want this tonight. Not because it's better, but it's because it's interesting and suits my mood tonight compared to all of those other whiskeys.
Before I take a trip down some of the memory lane that I want to get your commentary on, I'm going to take a couple of questions coming in on the chat line here. Jesse says, congrats on the awards for the Hungarian Oak. Just how diverse is the barrel library at the moment at Starward?
Yeah. So, I mean, you could lump, and I know you've had this conversation. I remember on Twitter, you kind of were controversially sort of suggesting that red wine perhaps is not as like a whiskey aged in red wine barrels is just that, right? Like it's this, whether it's a Shiraz or a Cabernet or a Pinot, or am I
I,
verbally?
look, I think I was saying something along the lines of, I think there's too much emphasis on that part of the discussion.
Right. I think, yeah, and
Like
so
no one goes, oh, this is an ex Jim Beam barrel, or this is an ex Maker's barrel, this is an ex Heaven Hill barrel. I mean, like, rarely do you even hear that as part of the discussion. They say it's ex bourbon. That was kind of my point.
Yeah, fair call. But the reality is, and I'd love to this is great format for this, right?
Sure.
Bourbon, hey, let me tell you, if you go to the Wild Turkey Distillery or the Jim Beam, the Jim Beam Distillery, or the Jack Daniels Distillery, their wood policy is very different from one distillery to the next.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it is. Yeah.
But, if we've got 3 inches of red wine oak, there's probably 1 inch of bourbon oak, because the bourbon producer's only making a barrel for a single use. They're not going to be generous about leaving anything behind for the Scotch whiskey producer or the tequila producer that they're going to sell their barrel to. So by the time it's spent for probably anywhere between 4 and 10 years at a bourbon distillery, it's done, right? It's a vessel that will give you like very subtle characteristics of the oak and previous use, the bourbon, but really it's the spirit doing the heavy lifting. And that's why I love bourbon cask finishes. I mean, I don't know that, I think that in Australia, ex-bourbon cask whiskies are I'm always most interested about those, because the spirit has to do the heavy lifting.
And
so
that's exciting. So, I mean, that gives an opportunity for the spirit to shine in those examples.
100%. But it's different with wine, because winemakers are kind of thinking about, like I said, the stave itself is thicker. It's visually thicker. We're engaging more with the oak than we would compared to an ex-bourbon barrel. And winemakers pay, well, let me say it differently. There's a huge amount of diversity in wood policy from different wineries compared to different bourbon distilleries.
Yeah.
So a Barossa Shiraz made at one winery is going to be very different to a Barossa Shiraz made at another winery, purely because the winemaker is choosing different oak from different forests, from different regions, right, to make the whiskey.
I think that was kind of my point, though. Is in like the difference in oak selection is far more important than the difference in X wine selection.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. And, that proves out, particularly with Starward, where it's not a finish, it's a start, right? Like, we're aging the whole way through. So any nuance a Pinot versus a Shiraz or a Cabernet are going to have is oxidized out by the end of that 3 to 4 year time frame.
I tell that to colleagues in the UK. I tell that to Scotch whiskey people. And I tell them, Starward, they say, oh, yeah, it's wine finished whiskey. And I'd say, no, it's not. It's wine matured whiskey. And they say, oh, well, that's, so you mean like they put it into wine casks? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. And so here's my nuance on that point, right? I think that if you're finishing whiskey in wine barrels, you're probably going to get a bit more of that Pinot versus Shiraz difference, right? Or certainly a Chardonnay, right?
Yeah.
But if you're aging in wine barrels from day dot, red versus white, absolutely. Chardonnay versus Chablis, probably not.
If you've just joined us, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, David Vitale, the founder of Starward Distillery, is joining us for a live chat. The numbers are always moving around, so I know some people are joining at some point in the stream, but we're having a chat about Starward, some of the history, some of the stories, and some of the tweets that David is still very shook about that I've said. So I'm gonna leave that one for now. But just going back to Jesse's comment, So in terms of diversity,
so the 95% of our inventory is now red wine barrel aged whiskey, from anywhere from the Barossa Valley right through Victoria to southern New South Wales. But most of it would be from Mornington Peninsula. You know, if you kind of drew a triangle from Mornington Peninsula up to the Barossa Valley, down to the coastline and back again, that would be, you know, the majority of that. Red wine, American oak, French oak, you know, they're the big kind of determinants of flavor profile. Charred and wet filled. So one of the magical things about making whiskey in Australia is that we can have wine go out and whiskey go in overnight. You know, so when we're working with wineries and winemakers and you know, some of the long-standing relationships we have, like for example with Yolumba, we're coordinating with them all the time so that we can get those barrels wet filled, still saturated with wine. And you know, roughly, it's hard to tell, but if we kind of use a, you know, if we weigh the barrel empty wet and then weigh the barrel empty dry, i.e. it's been at the distillery for about 6 or so months, there's about 4 liters of wine in the barrel when we fill it wet.
Right.
Found, right? Like it's a huge impact on the flavor profile. So wet filled, and then we shave, toast, and rechar the barrels as well. But we're not talking alligator skin, shave, toast, rechar. This is more the, you know, school of Jim Swan, very light shave, toast, and rechar that you see at Coverlan and God, I've gone blank. The Isla distillery starts with a K.
Kilhoman.
Thank you, Kilhoman. That have, you know, like mastered, you know, the Matt, you're gonna have to help me out. The Welsh distillery.
Penderyn.
Thank you. So you know, those distilleries are really known for working with Jim and sourcing great wine barrels and shave, toasting, and recharring them. But if you think about where I've just spoken about Taiwan, Isla, and Wales, there's barely enough sun in Wales and Isla to grow grapes, let alone have wineries locally. And Taiwan isn't really known for its wine growing kind of provenance. So by necessity, they need to be shaved, toasted, and recharred. Because we're so close, we can have that wine out, whiskey in. So American oak, French oak, shaved, toasted, recharred, wet filled, right? So we're up to 4. And then size plays a huge part, whether it's an octave, a barrique, or a hogshead. So we're at about 12 now. And then the other big determinant is how many vintages it's been at the winery. So if we get like a single vintage in and out, which is typically big Aussie Shirazes, they'll just have the barrel at the winery for one vintage and
out again. Yep.
That has a huge determinant. So that's now 24. And then obviously within the distillery, we've got first fill wine barrels and second fill wine barrels. So we're at 48. And obviously we fill with wheat and malted barley. So we're at 96. And that's just in the red wines. So there's a huge amount of diversity, and I, you know, like hand on my heart, can say each of those things are going to have a huge impact on the whiskey that comes out at the other end. You know, if I want to get cheeky and say then Shiraz, Cabernet, and Pinot, I don't even, what's 90? You know, we're up to 300. You know, but even at 96, I could release a single barrel every week from our distillery and still not come to the same one again after 2 years.
Yeah, that's wild. So I hope that answers your question, Jesse. A lot of other questions coming in, including one from one of our UK viewers right now who says, love Starward. Luckily, they are widely available here, mainly in the UK. Wish there were 148s available in the UK. Were the 148s available in the UK? 148.1 did get a small run into the UK. 148.2 we decided to keep for our Aussie members. So that one's they were both snapped up in seconds, of course, but you know, we you might get lucky at the vaults in the UK, but otherwise not for these first two. And in fact, you'll see from photos I'm going to bring up on the screen now, those first 2 casks were actually bottled in Australia, which was a first for the society for bottling Australian whiskey. We were going to send some IBCs over to the UK, but I wanted to do it here. Why not? I'm going to bring up some photos. Dave, I know you're not a huge fan of looking back at this and when it comes to the brand of Starward, but I want to just get your commentary on some of this. There's a photo for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's Essendon Fields, just as we're moving in. That's 1,800 square meters of space, and at the time, it was
By the way, that's you
like
on the right there.
it is? Wow,
Yeah,
geez.
yeah.
That was very big by certainly by Tasmanian standards.
Mm,
And, when we moved to Port Melbourne, it's literally double that footprint on the floor, but also in terms of height.
mm.
And today, we have 3 Port Melbournes in terms of storage, which is pretty profound. So
It's
we've
amazing.
we've come a long way.
I also want to show you your first desk. There you go. There's your
I don't even have these photos. This is amazing.
yeah. This is why I wanted to bring you on, just to show you some of this bit of history here. And I love the fact that there's a bit of documentation on the far left that says Corio. That's
Yeah.
rather cool. That's rather cool. And then there you go. Can you explain this photo?
So, we had a pilot still that we tested all of our new make trials on. It was it was basically it was suspended in oil. So it's a double jacketed pot still, suspended in oil. And what I did was tested all the different types of yeast that we were looking at producing Starward with. Not quite a morning coffee. I'd love it to be my morning coffee, Jesse, but like, it was set up as a really small pilot so that we could go through all the different yeast strains and then discern which one we wanted to use.
Yeah, it was a test. It was a test still, but it's rather cool to see like technically the first still in a way. It's like where it all started. The tests.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. And per liter, it cost me more than any still I've ever bought.
Yeah, Jesse Morgan asked morning coffee setup. Yeah. Distilled coffee, and then we've got, of course, the completed the full setup, the bar there at Essendon.
Yeah, so this is probably late 2014, early 2015. And so the barrels in the foreground are those Yalumba octaves that made the octaves release that we've just launched. Actually, they're in the background too. We had a fair few of them that we were able to get. And actually, if you pan out a bit, mate, like the lights that are on the hoop are the hoops from the barrels that made the bar.
Yeah, that's
So
very cool.
we sourced a big 5,000-liter vat from well, it was called Blue Pyrenees at the time, but it was actually an old Remy winery that was their bottling plant for all the brandy and cognac that came from France. And so these were huge. They're like, I'm going to say 5 meters in diameter and 10 meters tall, big oak vats that they didn't need anymore and were just sitting there empty. And so we went there and picked one up and then recommissioned it to be the bar at Essendon Fields. And if you go to Port Melbourne now, our master classroom table and one of the high tops is that old bar repurposed.
That's amazing. That's cool. I love that lineage of history of sort of that, even just if it's a bar top that's stood the test of time.
Yeah.
Question here from Sean, who asks, when you're starting out at Essendon Fields and you first tried your new make spirit, was the Starward banana characteristic a damn that's good moment, or sort of weird different, and it's been toned down or honed in since the original spirit?
Yeah, it's a great question. So banana's always been part of Starward. It's part of our fermentation process. It's, a fast, hot fermentation is going to drive banana characteristics. And, traditionally in Scotch whiskey and bourbon production, that's seen as a taint, actually.
Mm.
And I'm kind of, I wouldn't say anti-establishment, but I'm just like, why? And the answer was, well, that's just always the way it's been. And so for me, it was like, well, I kind of like it. I think it's really interesting and different. Those tropical fruit characteristics are distinctive. If we think about a distinctive Australian whiskey that we can take to the world, so banana was definitely something that I felt like that's fun and interesting. It it's quite volatile. So as the whiskey ages, it sort of like morphs a little bit. And so, the more youthful Starwards of like yesteryear have a lot more of it. And I actually had a first release, Matt. And it was just all green bananas. And this is the thing is, as it gets older, it's almost like the banana ripens.
Yeah, it does. And I've seen that with Starward Spirit, where over time, like our first release was 7.5 years old. It was a 7.5-year-old first fill Apera, and that's very different from sort of the 2, 3, 4-year-old wine or Apera, which would have just been like the spirit difference is quite pronounced, especially with a few more years in it. And have you seen that difference? Have you seen a difference yourself between like the characteristics between Essendon and Port Melbourne?
That's a great question. So we worked bloody hard. I was going to say something else then. Very, very, very hard. Like to
This isn't a PG stream. You can say whatever
all
you
right,
like.
I'm making sure. I don't want to kind of like have
No,
people.
you're all good.
But we worked bloody hard to get that spirit from Essendon Fields to Port Melbourne in the pocket of the things that we loved about the spirit. Did it change? Yeah, absolutely. But that was deliberate. It wasn't because we couldn't get it to be what we wanted it to be, but we made some decisions as we sort of scaled up that we thought would improve the spirit. And I'm probably going to say this about 10 times, so I'm just preparing everybody. 12 double gold medal whiskeys probably demonstrate that we made the right decisions.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Well, there's sort of what that era what you may be talking about, those green bananas in that sort of your gold leaf print sort of era.
Yeah. So there's $4 of 18 karat gold on that label, believe it or not. It's crazy. And there's a couple of things to point out on this. It was just called Starward, right? We didn't have Solera back then. We didn't have a wine cask. I actually look down the bottom, it says malt whiskey. And that was me being one step too cute when I started, because I think if we go single malt, most people's word association would be with Scotch, right? So even though it's definitely a single malt, all of our whiskies produced at, Port Melbourne and Essendon and single malts, like, I just felt like I didn't want to lean into that whiskey kind of nomenclature.
Well, you weren't really sort of like, it wasn't about appealing to the whiskey geeks, as you said. It was the sharing shelf. It was about something a bit different. It was, which is what sort of the spawn of the New World Project sort of stuff had to sort of capture, I guess, the geeks after that.
Yeah, I didn't not want
This
to be
stuff.
whiskey geeks, but this is like hands down. Actually, that is one of my favorite releases. Not because it was our first, but by God, it was bloody good.
I remember being at the Oak Barrel launch when you did this release, and I remember the mad rush outside of the room to grab a bottle of it.
I thought people were like, how can I put it? Like they were just so disinterested in what I was talking about that they were
That they're leaving.
I swear that's what I thought. And in fact, they were just buying bottles. And and I know like I keep an eye on our like socials. So for people that are curious, the batch number on the left indicates in reverse chronological order, like the date that it was batched. So this is a barrel from June 3rd, 2012. It was the third barrel filled that day and is the 693rd barrel that we filled. But on that day, it was actually a transfer. That's what the T stands for.
For those who like to nerd out, and I know for those who watch along in Friends of Starwood group, they definitely would like to nerd out on those kind of details. That's rather cool to know about that sort of batch numbering there. Okay, very cool.
So, but this is the transfer date. So if you look to the right, the 17th of March 2014 is the bottling date. So it spent 1 year and 9 months, I guess. I'm doing the maths in the transfer. And I can tell you, because I know, It couldn't have been more than 2 years because we started filling barrels in March 2010 in the original barrel. And the 100-litre double wood, this particular release was 100 litres a para cask, which was shaved, toasted, and recharred at SA Cooperage, and filled very early into an Apera barrel, and then transferred into a Yalumba barrel, and then aged another 2 years.
I guess that sort of answers Jesse's question here, is that you're specifying what you mean by double wood in the wording there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was Apera first, and then octaves. And I think I need to find this out. I'm not sure about this, but I'm going to have a stab and say that it was actually a shaved, toasted, recharred red wine barrel.
Very likely, yeah. Well, moving right along, just want to sort of get some context for all this, and then this is sort of like that mid-era, some of the photos that we've collected over the years of when it was still, I guess, New World Whiskey Distillery, before that was sort of phased out to just make way for Starward as the brand.
Yeah.
And some of the releases that myself got to pour at, like, first release ginger beer at different tastings that I used to host around Sydney.
So this is crazy. Yeah, look at that. I mean, that's crazy, isn't it?
There you go.
It is a sight to behold. So this is the distillery in Port Melbourne. What you're looking at, if you're at the front door looking all the way down, it's just shy of 1 acre under roof, whereas the original site was half an acre. But the big difference here is that we've got double the height.
And you've made use of that with the new site, which we'll get to. I mean, that's where we sort of the first move in sort of look there with the distillery at ground floor.
Yes.
And then there's halfway through the build, and then there's the rest of the build with the flooring put in. So you're able to go up as well as out.
Correct. And so, you know, this is the thing, as you scale up a distillery from a juice point of view, from a liquid perspective, actually the footprint doesn't change all that much. It's actually the storage that you require to lay away the whiskey that's the big challenge. And so these are our 2 new Frilly stills. They're Italian. They're beautiful to look at. And they leak. I'm joking. They don't leak, but like it's
Frillies don't leak.
No. But anything Italian that's mechanical and then, you know, engineered is going to have a leak for sure. But they're beautiful. They're amazing. We learnt a lot from that first upgrade, Matt. So if you go back a few slides, what you're looking at there is actually the original spirit still at the distillery the original wash still at the distillery becoming the spirit still. And we purchased a new wash still from Frilly. And when we moved in, we changed the technology as well. So we moved to steam, and then did a reboiler setup, which is actually having all of the energy transfer outside of the still on that blue thing, almost dead center to the screen, right? And so that's effectively, you know, we've got radiators in cars. Imagine a radiator that has steam on one side and liquid on the other, and that's what that device does in terms of transferring energy. And so all of the distillation was done with steam, which is a huge advantage from a environmental footprint perspective. Using, you know, gas-powered steam was a huge benefit to basically reducing our carbon footprint. We reduced by in that one, like, I'm going to say 2/3, if not more, of our carbon footprint per liter of alcohol produced. And then
and that's something as a distillery you guys have always been quite active on, in terms of like even that new setup outside about the water reduction system.
Absolutely. So even in those green, you know, those early photos that you're looking at, I was adamant, you know, in Port Melbourne, in Essendon, that we were going to set up the most sustainable distillery we could be, right? It was not about like the most sustainable distillery in the world. It was like, what can we do to make an impact? So at that point in time, the biggest thing that was driving my kind of philosophy was I need to be in the sharing cabinet, and a sharing cabinet whiskey needs to be around the same price as Balvenie Doublewood, because that's probably the most expensive whiskey that I'm having in my sharing cabinet, right, at that time.
Yep.
And that was a $75 whiskey when Australian whiskies were sort of sitting at the 150, 180. This is pre-Sullivan's Cove craziness.
Yep.
150, 180, maybe $200 for 500 mils.
Yep.
And so I was like, I need to be a $75 whiskey when everybody else is double that price. How am I going to do this? Well, I need to run those stills hot all the time to get the maximum efficiency out of them. And then I need to find every little bit of efficiency that we can in terms of like the big ticket items that cost money to make a whiskey. I'm not, I'm such a rounding error, and we still are on barley production in Australia. I'm not going to dictate the price of barley.
No.
But we can focus on yield, right? And so, recruiting brewers that were really smart from that perspective really helped us kind of draw as much of that wort, sugar into the wort that we can then ferment. I could focus on what we did with energy. So, what we did, because we ran the stills hot all the time, I could have the pot ale from both the spirit still and the wash still held in a tank, and then effectively transfer the energy from the pot ale through a heat exchanger into what I'm charging into the still for the next run. And so rather than starting at ambient temperature, 20 degrees Celsius, the stills would start running at 60 degrees Celsius. So I didn't have to heat up the spirit from 20 to 60. I'd gained 40 degrees of energy transfer. And on 3 runs a day, 7 days a week,
Makes a
45 weeks of the year, that's a huge difference. And then the big benefit, though, of doing that energy transfer wasn't necessarily the cost of the energy, it was time, because that meant that I could fit a third run in during the day. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
all of a sudden, from the same still coupling that you would have seen at Lark Distillery or at Overeem or at any distillery in Tasmania where someone said, I just want a still that looks like Bill's, we were making 21 barrels a week when they were lucky to make 5.
Right. And that's because of that energy transfer, as by having
The
that
energy,
third and that time.
yeah, and we had a couple of other smarts in there. In terms of just the way we heated up the stills and things like that. But it was just all about saying, I need to sweat these assets so that I can get to a point at which my fixed costs are covered across more bottles of whiskey. Because, like I said earlier, barley costs Lark Distillery and Starward back in 2007 the same price. Energy roughly is the same price. Labour, is probably cheaper in Tasmania, to be honest, than it is in Melbourne. Urban Melbourne, certainly. And so we had the same cost structures. It was the volume that we were producing that made the difference between that price point. And obviously great marketing by the Tasmanians. So, and I'm not trying to be defensive or pejorative, but it's just this is basic economics, right? That the more you make, you can, recover your fixed costs over more liquid. It means we could be sharply priced. But, when we turned up with that gold bottle that looked nothing like a whiskey that anybody had seen before, and certainly even a Tasmanian whiskey that looked very traditional in its kind of architecture and style, it was hard because, like, not only did we look modern, but we were half the price. So everybody just deduced.
Well, remember, you were very sharply priced. You were like 70 or something. Solera, like the Starwood was 70 or something.
It was price pegged at Balvenie Doublewood. That was my and that was 70 to 75, right?
Yeah.
But if you're someone going to the whiskey shelf, never heard of Starward before, and you see Lark, Sullivan's Cove, Overeem, Lime Burners, Bakery Hill, double the price of this whiskey, and it looks completely different to what you expect of a whiskey. It's not in scrolly fonts and like traditional sort of like nomenclature and calling sherry, a pair of sherry, and all those sorts of things. Like you're just going to say, this guy, this must be the cheaper, inferior whiskey that's on the shelf. And I'm going to say it again. I think today, 12 double gold medals from San Francisco
That's your fourth
can.
mention. That's your fourth mention.
Okay,
That's good.
10 times, we're doing 10. So, like it's the long game, Matt. It's been a long game of saying, I just need to kind of march to the beat of the drum of what gets us up in the morning. And in time, it will either be proved correct or incorrect, but I'm not going to die wondering through the process.
No. And I remember there's in the past there's always been, in fact, I think it was the second time I ever visited Essendon. I revealed to you the last Australian whiskey I bought and the price it was. I'm not going to name names, and I think you said, "Why?" was your response, and I'll never forget that. I felt so crappy for buying it. Here's a question from Jesse Morgan: what is the relationship like between the Australian distilleries? Is it a series of fierce rivalries, or is it more akin to a large family with many extended relatives?
It's totally a large family, but like every large family, it's also dysfunctional, right? So, um, but so like at every opportunity, I'm happy to give jibes to Cam up in Western Australia. I mean, he's batshit crazy. He's got 3 distilleries and thinking about a fourth. I mean, it's just crazy. Like just the idea of that. And my Tasmanian friends, without whom I wouldn't have anything today. Like, I kind of feel like, but for the age of the cars that you see on the streets, you'd still think you're back in 1988 in Tasmania, and probably
Yeah.
even earlier if we're talking about whiskey production. So we have great banter, but like, and this comes from Bill Lark. He has espoused from the very beginning that a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
And like, if someone wanted to set up a distillery next door to us in Port Melbourne, aging whiskey in wine barrels, right, for 3 Melbourne years, I'd be wrapped. I mean that. I genuinely mean that. Because it's just like we're the OG, but more importantly, like we're like creating something that defines the category.
Is there a warehouse open on Birdie Street somewhere that someone can leap on that opportunity?
Toyota's just moved out across the road, so.
Well, there you go. You heard it here first. I'll just run through a couple more little sort of like just a bit more commentary from you on a couple of things here. I'll just drop that comment out. Now, you said that you've got you've got 3 Port Melbourne's worth of storage now.
Yeah.
That's one of them not quite full yet, but that one's now full. That's
Yes.
but tell us how that works, and has there been any sort of, again, research or sort of placement into how that's changed the maturation of the spirit?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Like this is lower in like, so what we've learnt is the density of barrels in a bond store make a huge impact on the distill, and that's pretty straightforward. Like we're not kind of breaking ground there in terms of research, but the density of barrels makes a huge difference. And so this sort of format that you're looking at now is more like what we had at Essendon Fields. And given how much we've learnt about wood policy and what works for us as distillers from wineries, we're able to kind of like, this is exciting because we're getting quality whiskey out of the bond store sooner than we are at Port Melbourne.
Right. Okay. So you are seeing it accelerated somewhat there.
Yeah. And so the question then becomes, well, can we serve more people, or do we actually still stick to our 3 Melbourne years and make even better whiskey than the one that's just won 12 double gold medals at San Francisco?
Yeah, that's 5. That's 5. Okay, we're getting there. We're getting there.
Halfway, we're halfway.
Yeah. I also just want to show a couple of behind the scenes photos of us working with you guys, because it was a huge deal for us, having that relationship with you guys, and just your amazing team of, pallets and pallets of differently shaped glass bottles appearing at Port Melbourne one day, which didn't quite fit the machines at first, but we worked it out. And then having your amazing team actually, being able to hand label each one, because again, the roller doesn't fit the differently tapered bottles. Society bottles and SMWS bottles and Starward bottles are differently shaped. And then, getting them all the caps on, all the heat shrinking, and picking actual casks with your team, like I said, has been fantastic. But of course, it's all about the people, and there's two of them who have been instrumental in some of the casks that we picked out for SMWS.
Amazing. And if I have to call out anyone at the distillery, I mean, Sam Slaney is employee number one, and he is the better half of me when it comes to making whiskey.
Yeah, I don't have a very flattering photo of Sam, only a really dorky one, but yeah,
that's as flattering as it gets with Sam.
I realize that, but yeah.
But these two are amazing individuals. Carly and Jared are so instrumental in terms of crafting all the whiskies we make, and Brad part of that team too. And I'm just so happy. It brings me so much joy to know that,
you've got an amazing team there.
I can sleep so well in the United States knowing that there are people that care as much as I do about making something that we can all be really proud of, and that actually, they understand what we're trying to do, which is not be nostalgic about whiskey and take it back to the 60s or whatever it is, but just really push it and see what we can do to kind of make a statement about whiskey coming from Australia, and yeah, I'm just eternally grateful for the amazing team that I have, both upstream and downstream, from in terms of production, because they all get it and they all love what they do. And, they make my life very, very easy.
Yeah. No, they're fantastic people, and it's the people that make the spirit, isn't it? It's like one of my lines at all my tastings has always been, people often say it's only barley, water, and yeast, and I always say it's also casks, time, and people. It's the other three ingredients that everyone forgets that make this amazing spirit that we all get to enjoy.
Yeah.
There's one last question coming in from, there's a few more, but I'm just going to pick a few more out here. Nothing off limits. So he asks, distillery casks used for the Starward unexpeated.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there's your curveball that you can.
Is this recorded, Matt? Or
I don't know. I mean, probably yes, but we can always edit this part out.
So, it's the Isla casks, right? Obviously, the Isla casks. And all of you know that we have a very great relationship with a international distillery or international spirits company called Diageo. So that should limit where we're coming from. And I'm not going to tell you the distillery, but I'll just say that it starts with L.
A Diageo distillery starting with L. Couldn't be more obtuse. There you go. That's good. That's fine.
Let's say the name.
Yeah. And just a question on international presence. It's great to see so many international guests tuning in tonight. How is Starward's presence, international presence? I've heard it's quite popular in Germany.
Yeah, Germany's on track to be our number one European market, probably in the next 3 months. It's just blazing.
Wow.
We've been slogging it out in the UK, oh God, for 5 years, and Germany maybe 2, and it's just on fire. So that's really, really exciting. And I think it just talks to that curious whiskey drinker we're talking about beforehand. And the only difference between, say, a France, a Germany, and a UK in that context is, I think those other two markets are really spoiled for choice.
Mm-hmm.
In a way that Germany probably isn't. And so Starward turning up with something really interesting kind of works in that manner. And, I think We're now in 40 states in the United States, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
We've got feet on the street in 16 of those states, which is amazing. I lead a team of 8 marketing people that complement the team in Melbourne. They support us in what we're trying to do on the ground over there, and then we share a sales force of 15 people with another great Australian brand called Mr. Black on the ground in the United States. And without them, without that sales force and the marketing team on the ground, we wouldn't be able to do anywhere near the work that we do in the States. But it's a crazy market, the US. It's just so, like I said earlier, it's so competitive.
And three tier as well, which makes it even trickier.
It's a little more trickier. But I think the key thing is that, like, as much as 12 double gold medals from San Francisco is important to a brand like ours, there's actually no fucks given about Australian whiskey in the United States. That's the reality, right? And so I have to get out there every single day. And do you remember in the World Cup they had those vuvuzelas? A really annoying kind of sound. And
I remember them. Yeah.
Got lots of people's attention. That's me for Australian whiskey.
and you're the only one holding one as well.
Right. So I am the Australian whiskey vuvuzela out there every bloody day, kind of trying to muster up some interest in this category.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, we thank you for it on behalf of the Australian whiskey appreciation, of people who appreciate whiskey in Australia and people who enjoy Australian whiskey. Keep blowing that vuvuzela. And I want to thank you so much for your time this evening, just to chat and just to catch up and let members have an insight into sort of the what would you call it, behind baseball, look at Starward and from the founder himself, and have a chat about some of the history and taking some members' questions. So, Dave, I'll leave you to it for now. But I really want to thank you again and again for taking your time this evening, and I'm glad the Wi-Fi issues all worked out in the end.
Oh my God, yeah, thanks, Matt. I was a bit like flustered for a moment because I just thought, like we were supposed to do. It was going to be the phone, but I've got my US phone, which is kind of like God knows where that's bouncing data from. So like,
oh yeah.
I'm just glad it worked out. We've got to do this more frequently, and I'd love to. Wouldn't it be great to get Will Edwards on and Cam and Bill and some newer distilleries that are starting up, and just have a lovely chat about what's going on in their worlds as too.
Absolutely.
It's so exciting. Where I've said this publicly, and I'll say it again. I'd take the keys to any Australian whiskey distillery, such as the quality that's coming out of Australia. Like, the big challenge is quantity, not quality. And that's going to change. It's changing. I kind of blush at the scale of Archie Rose now, which is kind of funny in a way for me, because like I always kind of chest out sort of thought, well, we're making more whiskey than anyone, and it's like, well, not anymore. So
no.
Which is great. I'm so excited by that. But like, I think that whether you're making millions of liters or hundreds of liters, like, it's just such an exciting like place to be. And we're blessed with amazing distillers that are so passionate about what stories they want to tell about whiskey.
Yeah, and it's amazing. And I'll just echo your point from just earlier about it really is a big family, and it's such a supportive community as well, which is why we all love what we're doing. So, on that note, thank you again, Dave. I really appreciate it. Don't go anywhere. I'll drop you out just for now, but thank you so much, and thanks from all the members in SMWS for your time this evening. Stay right there. I'll catch up with you in a moment. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much to Dave. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight for another live with SMWS. I'm Matt Bailey, the National Ambassador. I shouldn't even say that anymore. I'm Matt Bailey, the Branch Director for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society here in Australia. Really appreciate your time this evening. Really appreciate you watching. This will be on our YouTube channel. We won't even bleep out the swear words. It's going on YouTube. But we'll catch up with you all soon. And I'll see you next week for another live. Have a great Easter weekend, everyone. Eat some hot cross buns, eat too many Easter bunnies. You know how it goes. And I'll catch up with you all soon. Cheers.